consumers, B2B executives included, distrust brands. They distrust institutions, advertising, the press, all of this stuff more so than ever before. What you're going to see is a move away from sellers, marketers, brands, and their communications as trustworthy. We're having to overcome this obstacle of trust.
Influential and thought-provoking minds in marketing, sales, and business. The Business of Marketing Podcast.
Welcome again to the Business of Marketing. I'm A. Lee Judge. Building brand and demand. Businesses and the marketing teams within them circle around these two terms because one is tied to recognition and top of mind, brand, and the other indicates whether what you're offering is even wanted or not, demand. So while businesses would like to excel at both of those things, they often struggle to balance their focus between the two. Today, I'm talking with a fellow marketer and agency owner that is doing the work to help companies manage this balance. So welcome to the show, the co-founder of AH Marketing, Aaron Hassen. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, it's so good to be with you. This is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, man, you're an old friend now. We've actually met in person, hung out some, had some agency marketing talk, and we're good friends now.
Yeah, I'm watching you, man. You're taking off like a rocket, and I want to do the same. So I appreciate you, and you've been a sort of mentor to me. So thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Well, we're still out there doing the work to help these companies. So I want to thank you for joining today. And I have to also thank you for those who are listening. Aaron has an expert insight in a book that I have coming out very soon. In fact, by the time you hear this, it may already be out. The book is called CASH. It stands for Communication, Alignment, Systems, and Honesty. And in the book, we have lots of experts, including Aaron Hassen here is in the book.
What a privilege and an honor. Thank you for allowing me to be in there. And I hope, people get some real good insights from your book. I'm sure they will, but especially, from, some of the experts that you have in there. And thank you for including me.
Well, Aaron, there's something you said in the book that it resonated so well with the part of the book that was there that it was easy picking your quote to put in the book. And it's not just a quote, it's a part of our conversation we had a few months back while I was writing, or soon after I finished. But we mentioned the customer journey, and you said that, there's only one journey. And, sometimes it's something I thought about in the book too, but we think there's a sales journey or a marketing journey, but there's only one journey. So if you want to hear more Aaron's thoughts on that, it is definitely in the book.
Yeah, and that's true. There is one journey, and I believe there should be one team when it comes to sales and marketing. I don't think that's two separate efforts. I think that's one effort. So I think, I know we align on that view, and some of what's in your book is going to help, companies and brands kind of align their teams together so they can make a bigger impact in the market.
Absolutely. So thanks again for that. For those of you who pick up the book, it's called Cash. And I look forward to hearing your feedback on that and checking out Aaron's part of the book. But today we're talking about a few different things. We're talking about one of the main things is brand and building demand. And Aaron, I know that we're in a couple of marketing groups together, so we see some of the same conversations and we participate in conversations. And a current conversation in our circle is that brands need to be bolder. So what are your thoughts on if there's a difference in the way business-to-business brands can approach bold as opposed to maybe more customer-focused brands?
Yeah, and, it's important to set the context on this. And I think the context, at least from my perspective, starts with the pandemic. So we're all forced into our homes. We're all forced into orienting ourselves and everything we did our entire life around, digital communication and devices. And so that really created a shift. So think about now, if you're a B2B company, that you're actually trying to attract people, many of them who are working from home. So these are now executives who are working from home, accessing those local devices, watching their TVs at home, on their mobile phones at home. So they're acting a lot more like traditional consumers. Because if you think of that environment, you start to understand, where people are going for their information. So it's less and less those traditional B2B channels, and it's more and more those B2C channels. So we're listening to podcasts as we do, as most consumers do. So, we're, like I said, we're watching TV, we're on YouTube, and these are more and more the places we're going to find our information and be influenced. And so we need to keep that in mind in B2B, that, while industry publications and associations and those newsletters and things like that may have been more influential in the past, they're less so today because of that shift to the at-home worker, to the personal and professional lives mixing together. So when you get to this point about channels, that would be the point that I would make, that we need to pay attention to things like social media. So executives are on their personal cell phones, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and they're spending more and more of their time in quote unquote B2C channels. So that's the first thing to understand, I think. But the next thing to understand is, the level of noise out there in the market, because it's only increasing. So that we know, with AI and how easy it is now to produce content, and to publish content. So all of these channels, all of the traditional things like, radio and TV have been democratized, so no longer are we on AM, FM radio, we're now on podcasts. And guess what? You could produce your own and get it out there, by yourself. So it's creating the ability to do more of that. And so in order for brands to stand out in this democratized environment, where there's more content and more voices, they really do have to be bold. And you're right about that, because they have to, you only get so many at bats, so many turns to kind of get someone's attention. And when you get that opportunity, it needs to make an impact to be memorable, so that they'll spend the time and the attention to inquire more. And so that's what we know as B2B companies. We have to start to focus on the right channels, and then when we communicate, we have to do so in a bold way to get the attention, and to earn the attention, actually.
I think that even before the pandemic, the sense of people consuming content, being the consumers, whether you're an executive or you're buying something from a beauty brand, you were a consumer. You had the channels you watched and consumed content from even before then. It's just that I think before the pandemic, businesses assumed that business people only consume business sitting in their office, as if those people weren't humans unplugged from a cubicle or an office, as if we didn't look at our phones for social media and talk to each other and have word of mouth and all the other social channels that we consume. We assume that, businesses communicate with businesses through their email and in their office. And I think the only thing the pandemic did in that aspect is made us realize that, wait, we're no longer in the office, but yet we're still contacting these people. How is that happening? Oh, they're humans. And if we communicate with humans, then we're communicating with our customers, who are our consumers, whether they're business to business consumers or they're business to direct consumer, right?
Yeah. And I do think there's been an influence, as we've come away from the business environments and into our personal environments. Mm-hmm. I do think we'll spend more time on the informal channels like we would on our time off. So,
mm-hmm.
If you're not inside the office, focus on business problems, sitting in meetings, reading those publications on your desk, or those newsletters come out. That's a heightened focus in a business environment. And I think as we got into a work from home environment, and then more and more of us were shifting into digital channels and an increase in digital reliance, I think, some of the traffic and some of the consumption, went away from those professional channels and towards those consumer channels, just as a nature of how we were living our lives. We're taking our meetings, walking around and listening to a podcast. So there's a convergence that happened. And I think it's leaned us towards a B2C environment.
Well, the word you used was informal. I like that, because when you picture business communication, you think formal, and when you think social, you think informal. And I think that ties into our question about being bold, because there was never a lack of boldness on informal communication, but there's always a lack of boldness inside the business because we felt like we were inside the business. Like you wouldn't say or do certain things sitting in your office, but you might say those things sitting around with your friends. And if you look at it from a standpoint of marketing, perhaps if maybe that's one way that businesses can see that it's important to be a little bit more bold in the fact that your communication channels are a lot less formal. Some businesses are getting it and they're doing less formal marketing, which to many is bold. To do anything that's not overly branded or overly jargon filled with their product and their brand and their logos and things. Maybe it should be a little bit more informal to just have people involved, telling their stories, being who they are, experiencing life through or with that brand. That's a lot more informal. And I think for many brands, that in itself is bold.
Yeah, you're right. And what I think it is, and I'll kind of, I agree with what you said. And the way it sits in my mind is the logical versus the emotional appeal. So for so long, B2B has stayed very logical. In those office environments, the creative teams developing things that made a lot of sense from a logical purchase standpoint, but as people are at home, as executives are at home, as people, begin this convergence of their lives, having this work-life balance, these work-life balance goals and things like that, we're having to reach people at an emotional level more so than we ever did before, because that's what they're used to on the B2C side, right? It's the emotional appeal. And, that's what attracts us to the B2C brands many times. It's entertainment, or it's, like I said, connecting with us on a deeper level, and we're having to start to make music rather than, public service announcements. So, if we
Which
want
is
to
more
hit
art than science.
yeah, we've got to hit something inside and not just, outside and providing information. And when people are in a business environment, they're much more logical. So it made sense. When people are in a personal environment, an informal environment at home, around their kids, it's very different to attract that person. And so that's why B2B needs to make that shift and be more bold from an emotional standpoint in attracting folks.
Here's a fun one for you, Aaron. We both run agencies. We both work with businesses. And when you talk about being bold or informal or less than logical with a business, you might lose that business as an agency, right?
They're scared of that.
They're scared of that. And in fact, we had a situation recently where we saw the best path for them for this particular company, but we knew that because of the size of the organization, because each individual had to be safe within their job, all the way up to the CMO, the safe route was the best thing for them to do to not rock the boat. It's a big organization. Being bold does not help their job stability.
Yeah.
Being bold means doing things that are less measurable, perhaps. And if it's not measurable, it doesn't look good for their job. Like, how can I report my work this quarter, this half, if I can't report what I can measure? I can't go out there and be bold and not be able to measure it. So when you're talking to a corporation and there's a team of marketers or a hierarchy of marketers who have great jobs, they have great jobs they want to keep. How do you get to them and introduce things that might be bold when they may not want to deal with the change?
Yeah. Well, we talked about how attention is hard today. Attention is difficult to get because all of us are so inundated with information throughout our day, and any executive knows that. I mean, we seem to be more under pressure. There's more things to do as we're more connected, as we're more accessible digitally through our devices and every other way. It's just really hard to get our attention. And if a brand is going to even have a shot, they've got to do something remarkable, as Seth Godin has said, in Purple Cow so many decades ago, right? So he's been telling us for a while. But this is true, and it's especially true now. But there's another layer to this that we need to understand. It is risky to not be bold. And the reason I say that is because today, more so than ever before, and particularly after the pandemic, consumers, B2B executives included, distrust brands. They distrust institutions, advertising, the press, all of this stuff more so than ever before. So if you're watching Ipsos data, Edelman's Trust Barometer, or anything like that, what you're going to see is a move away from sellers, marketers, brands, and their communications as trustworthy, right? So we're having to overcome this obstacle of trust. And in order to do that, you have to really connect with people in a way that builds that affinity, which, if they like you, then they'll tend to be able to trust you. So you can take that relationship from an affinity to a trusting relationship. They want to know, do you get me? And are you in it for my good? Is this, so if you can answer some of those questions in the affinitive, especially with that in that first moment or two, and they feel like you get them, then they'll listen longer. And they'll continue to listen to see, do they get me? Yes. Do they have something that solves my problem? Right? Like, I'm at risk, I have an issue, and I really want to solve this, and I'm motivated to do so. Is this somebody that I can partner with and I can trust to partner? Because there's a lot on the line for business executives, particularly today, when budgets and staffing is being cut or it's more scrutinized. So they're in an environment that's just, a heightened environment, and we have to have empathy for them. And when we're going to communicate, not waste their time and make it, remarkable, make it memorable.
It's funny you mentioned remarkable, that Seth Godin said, and then our friend Mark Schaefer says, what is it? Is it audacious? Audacity?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like these words definitely ring for the current time. Like if you're not those things, then it's hard to stand out.
Mm-hmm. And being human is you're a big proponent of this. It's how to be more human. Is today what creates trust. We all have a BS meter, and
Yeah.
and we're all more savvy. So people have been promoting themselves and selling themselves for decades now on social media. We're all cognizant of what that looks like. Back in the early 90s with the, some of the infomercials and things like that. I mean, they could get us. Like you'd watch an infomercial and you'd buy the product, and they had a method and a pattern, but still, I mean, somehow
We couldn't wait but wait, there's more. You knew it was coming.
yeah. But today, people are more sensitive to that because they've seen that, so they understand that. And they may have even done that themselves. They've created a landing page. They've sold, some subscription or product. We have these content creators out there, these influencers now that, and to some extent, we're all sort of promoting ourselves. So we've all been educated, and we can see it coming a mile away. And so brands have to step up and do better and be more human and more authentic and do something that really resonates.
That's a perfect segue, because I wanted to ask you about something, and because not only are we both marketers, we're also both business owners. So I'm going to pose to you one of our current business challenges at Content Monster. So one of our main products is always in, or at least is currently in, demand generation phase, because we help companies create those videos of their experts, of their leaders, the founders, executives, to show that real authentic conversation like we're having right now. We're going to say things now that are not scripted, that did not sound like an infomercial, because we're genuinely giving information to our listeners. And so one of the things we produce for our clients is we help them capture their executives on video to make website and social media content. And we do it remotely. Wherever they are in the world, we can help them capture those people without having to do the studio thing. But that's a demand generation. They don't know that they can even do that. So once we create the demand, we let them know it's possible. Oh, it's an easy sale. They all go for it because they know, wow, I didn't know I could record 10 executives this month or this week even without all this expense they expect. So we're between that demand generation. And then we realize also we haven't always put the Content Monster brand out there. I mean, I'm wearing a shirt now, which is rare to actually have the brand out front.
Love it.
So when you're talking to companies, what's your advice on balancing brand versus demand generation?
There's brand and there's demand, and traditionally those have kind of been separate. But again, there's a level of convergence happening out there. And let me explain why that is. And so the first thing I want to say is go brand. And the reason I want to say go brand, and brand is demand, is because that's what I want to truly say to you. But the reason I want to say that is because if you're tracking the customer, what you're noticing is that they're purchasing more and more today based on influence. So we have a lot of dark social channels, as they're called. This environment of distrust has caused people to go dark, to places that can't necessarily be tracked. So they want to speak to their colleagues on Slack. They want to go into their communities, maybe on Discord. And this is where they want to be influenced. These are the people they trust, maybe their coworkers or counterparts or friends and family. This is how decisions are being made today. And so to be able to influence people in places that count, in where they're actually making their decisions, you have to kind of become part of the trust, in the trust circle, in that circle. And that's harder to get into. And we just spoke about being bold and meaningful in your communications, to where, your people understand that you get them and you're out for them and you have a solution that could help them solve a real problem in their lives. That's the beginning of trust. Sorry. And that's the beginning of people talking about you. So that's, in essence, traditionally was in the branding bucket. So, branding, is awareness, affinity, which then leads to trust. So we want to create that awareness first, and then that affinity, which, I like you, I might suggest you to someone. So, and so that's where I would recommend, especially today, because of the way things are purchased through influence, and many times word of mouth, whether that be on digital channels or in real life, just talking to people in conversation. I think the branding moments can be as meaningful and as important as traditional, demand generation was in the past. Like typically in the past, and I was a founder that turned into a marketer. So I've spent the last 18 years after my company was acquired helping other founders. And many of these are VC-backed startups from Silicon Valley, Y Combinator type companies, and they have to grow quickly, 2x, 3x a year. There's not a lot of runway. They've really got to figure it out and figure it out fast. And so you want to get to the effective marketing quickly, because they just don't have the money or the time to mess around with things that don't work. And so I had to figure out, and I continue for my clients to figure out what works. And what works today are influence channels. And so think about the community you're trying to serve and who your best buyer is and how they are influenced. And typically you're going to find their friends, their family, their coworkers, the people in their online communities, all the things that I had mentioned. And the best way to get someone else to talk about you to them is to say something and do something impactful, either, from a messaging standpoint or in the community, or, to do something they don't expect that really resonates with them that they want to talk about. And so that's in the branding category, but it also ends up building demand because they begin to talk about you. So I would really focus on what I call digital word of mouth, or, the new word of mouth, because I think that's the best place now to invest. are those types of channels. So, you know, and I'll just say at the end of this, I'll tell you kind of for me what I see with our customers. They're investing in live events. Why? Because people are talking there. In their partners, because partners talk about introduce you into accounts. These dark social channels I mentioned, like getting inside of communities or building communities themselves, on social media, having conversations, anywhere you can interact with people that can then spread your message and tell your story are going to be your best channels today because of this environment of distrust and because of the way, B2B buyers are now purchasing solutions in ways that the B2C buyers have in the past.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you mentioned, having those conversations because I want to wrap up with some of your conversations you've been having recently. I know you have a new season to your podcast. So tell us about that, maybe a few spoilers of who's coming up on the show soon, and so we can look forward to that.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning it. I'm just following in your footsteps. This show is amazing. You've had some really notable experts on your podcast, and I'm trying to do the same. So I've also had people like, Mark Schaefer. I try to cover, because of my background in B2B startups, I try to cover both sales voices and marketing voices because I believe, again, that we are one team. So in a lot of ways, marketing is visual selling. We sell with words and pictures. So I have people on there like Jake Dunlap. He's a sales expert, or Anthony Anarino. He's written many books on sales. But recently, I had Amanda Russell. She was a YouTube star that became a professor at the Kellogg School and wrote the curriculum on influence. So I talked to her about influence today and its impact and how you can use influence as a company to really, spur growth. And so she's got a background in that. She wrote a curriculum on that. She sold 2 businesses by the time she was 32. She's a really stellar person with a lot of business experience. And it all started for her when she was on her way to the Olympics, and then she got an injury. And so she was an elite athlete that led her into the business world. And she's got a very interesting story. And I love to tell those stories. I talk to folks like that, but then I talk to behavioral scientists like Nancy Harhut. We know Nancy, and she's great, but she gives us marketing hacks and things we can do to sort of, increase conversion rates and get people to respond to our messages. Those are the type of people I like to have on because I'm trying to learn and improve my skills and what I bring to clients. But yeah, you can find that on YouTube. It's my YouTube expert interview series. You can look up my name on YouTube. It's called Business with Humans. And yeah, it's great. We're in season 2. And so far I've had 5 guests this season. I've got another one coming. His name is Mark Staus. You may know him from Proof Analytics. He's a guy who focuses on predictive analytics, seeing the future through analytics. So I'm going to talk to him about AI and what's coming and how he's predicting the future and helping companies, with their, forecast and understand, the kind of decisions they should be making to prepare their strategies. And yeah, it's fun. And I'm learning a lot, and I hope people will join me.
That sounds good. I hope everybody will check it out. I think I did actually just peep that episode you mentioned earlier with the influencer. I saw part of that, so I want to finish that out. So yeah, everyone please check out Aaron's podcast. Just like myself, we reach out to some of the best marketers and innovators in the industry, whether it be sales or marketing, business. You can definitely find some good conversations there. So before we go, Aaron, it's been excellent talking to you. So thanks again.
Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate the time.
All right, sure thing. So also thanks to the listeners. If you're listening to the podcast and want to also see Aaron and I, video of the podcast and others are available in the podcast section of contentmonster.com. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Business of Marketing podcast, A show brought to you by ContentMonster.com, the producer of B2B digital marketing content. Show notes can be found on ContentMonster.com, as well as aleejudge.com. To continue the conversation, be sure to follow the podcast on your favorite podcast platform.